Welcome to the live stream. You can check the timestamps down below if you're watching on replay. I got you with the dramatic clickbait title and this black book candle. I do not know what we're talking about today. If this is your first time on one of my live streams, my name is Jordan Thornton. I've read over 700 psychology books, reread 200 of those psychology books, and I have maybe grasped about 5% of what I've read if I'm lucky, which is still hopefully at least a handful of wisdom nuggets or shadow insights for you. Today, my community will prompt me and prod me in a consensual manner for a variety of personal answers to their personal questions. These are a lot of fun. I do them every week, have been for almost a year now, and this is going to be another shadow work special. So as we wait for new people to come in, you are free to skip forwards on the timestamps and see what the questions were, or you can watch me dither and babble as I fill the void and, most importantly of all, bring up my own live stream on my online streaming phone. You can see today's video that I just uploaded, which is Humanity Has Fallen, 2045 Consciousness Predictions based on reading consciousness studies, spiral dynamics, integral psychology, these kinds of things. But we're not looking for that. We are looking for the video that you just clicked on, so I can monitor the chat. Welcome if you're joining live. Say hello in the chat. Do not be shy. I do not bite, but your shadows might. Let me know where you're watching from in the world, and if you have any psychology questions for me, I will be obliged to answer, because that is my burden in this life. I am blessed with the weight of other people's emotional baggage, and hopefully, if you're willing to work through it, we can actually unburden that baggage forever, and we don't need to carry it anymore. That is what we're doing here. Leave me a message in the chat. Say hello. I see Yasmin is here. Hello, Jordan. Good to see you here, Yasmin Zah. Cool Sun 08 is here saying hello. Yasmin's here from Palestine. Welcome from Palestine, Yasmin. I'm glad that you're joining in. How are you finding the experience of balancing your inner work and your psychological growth with also being in obviously a very high conflict area of the world right now? Class says hello. Pre says hello. I see hello from Miami from Sergeant Yoshi. Didn't know that Yoshi had joined the military, but I guess the Goombas got the best of him once or twice, and he decided to give Mario some aid and get some military training. I wonder what kind of equipment he might use. Elizabeth says, hello, Jordan. Good to see you here, Elizabeth. Long-time contributor and wise questioner. Yoshi's laughing at me as if I don't know the ways of the militaristic green lizard. I think he's a lizard. He is a green lizard. Is he a dinosaur? No, he's a dinosaur because he has a dinosaur eggs. That's who Yoshi is. If anyone has any psychology questions for me, please do leave them in the chat. If you would like to say hello, you can also say hello to me. I do read almost everything from the chat. Charlie Lord is here saying, greetings from the sacred lands of Broader New England. Broader New England sounds like a place in Brave New World or 1984, like Airstrip 1. Broader New England sounds like it's a dystopian future where everybody's forced to wear the exact same overalls and they must contribute to the utopian vision, which is actually a dystopian vision, compared to what happened to England and then New England, and now we have Broader New England. The third time's the charm. Maybe we make society work this time, but guess what? The despots and the dictators will take advantage of us unless we are wary. Unless you want me to continue to blabber and make up loads of bullshit for the next hour or so, please do give me a psychology question, my friends. It is wonderful to have you here in real time. Do not be shy if you're joining live. Give me a psychology question. Wait for your psychology question to be answered. And Charlie Lord says we have to wear boat shoes and read the New York Times every day. Interesting. Ah, what a punishment. Quite the cruel and unusual punishment to have to read the New York Times every day. Not necessarily the most reputable or noteworthy of papers out there, but then again, let's be real, how much of the, I think they call it legacy media or mainstream media, is necessarily all that reliable? You have to, at the very least, read multiple sources. Haley Woods says, shadow, question. I think, Haley, are you concerned about the nature of what is a shadow overall, or are you just asking in a general sense who the shadows might be? First question of the live stream. Thank you, Blue Violet Soul. Hi Jordan, I see make 1984 fiction again. Very, very timely for you to join in when I just spoke about 1984 and Brave New World. Good to see you here, my friend. I wish I knew your actual name. I always know you from your username, make 1984 fiction again. Been a while since I caught a live. Hello, good to see you here. Elizabeth Carmela says I'm in New England too, up in Maine. We say wicked a lot. And Johnny is also here, says, evening, it's been a minute. Welcome, Johnny. We've got 2 questions. Let's dive in deep. I'll do everything I can in at least 60 minutes. We might go all the way to an hour and a half, but I do have my second Shadowwork Library group coaching seminar at midnight UK time. I am indeed a teacher, believe it or not. I am not just a weird recluse hermit who lives in his library and speaks into a camera to an anonymous mass of individuals, including yourself, on the thing called YouTube. I also have my own Shadowwork school called the Shadowwork Library, and we will be doing a 15 to 25 person, depending on how many people show up, with the EU seminar. That finished about an hour ago. I'll be doing the USA seminar later on at midnight, so we've got a maximum of 2.5 hours until I literally need to go and then run a 90-minute class. But we probably won't go for 2.5 hours. 1 to 1.5 hours on this live stream. Put your question in the chat. I will give you 3 therapeutic shadow psychology guidance of a non-binding nature, but merely anecdotally speaking. Let's go into the first question. Angie, make 1984 fiction again. Wonderful, wonderful. Okay. So, Blue Violet Soul. Hi Jordan, do you have any suggestions about where to look at when dealing with social phobia? Social phobia is fundamentally a safety issue. There is a significant reason that you have running the script either mentally or in your body of why it's unsafe to be social. It's very, very likely, although I don't know you, that you had a significant form of social punishment or some form of fear around socializing with other human beings at an earlier stage in your life. People who have social phobia don't develop it out of nowhere. There had to have been at least one major reference experience of something cripplingly punishing happening, or it could be many small, complex experiences throughout childhood, many embarrassing moments, many conflicts, or maybe parents have got fearful narratives of how the world is and why you shouldn't go out there and why you should stay to yourself. Stay safe, my little darling. Don't go out and play in the world. What about all the evil kidnappers? Something like this. Or you have developed social phobia at a later point in life, and it's likely again due to some kind of, not necessarily traumatic, but at the very least bruising, wounding, or traumatizing experience. From my perspective, I don't like applying the word trauma in every single context because that is an overhyped, arguably clickbaity, cliche word in the current digital climate in 2025, so I give a much more accurate assessment at the very least of intensity along the trauma spectrum. You have a bruise, everyone knows the experience of having a bruise. It lasts for about a week or so when you knock yourself on something. You have a wound, maybe you scrape, maybe you cut, that might last for a month until it needs to be bandaged up, or it could be a particularly deep wound that might need several months to bandage up. There'll be a scar from that, but a deep trauma, that tends to be more of a psychological damage. And of course it can be physical damage as well, but that's, for me, I'd reserve that for the far end of the spectrum. When talking about social phobia, you could have a bruise, a wound, or a trauma. I don't know him personally. The practical advice for what I'd recommend to you isn't necessarily go straight for the exposure therapy route of getting yourself into new friendship situations, going to work parties, going on more dates, whatever it might be. I would look at the nervous system blockages and the potential fearful, angry, terrified, paranoid patterns and go a level beneath the social phobia pattern. Social phobia is merely an outcropping of a deeper pollution or a deeper disturbance, which probably has other aspects of psychological disturbances elsewhere in your life. Look at the core of why I don't feel safe. Ask yourself the question, what would I need to feel safe in a social situation? And then strip that back. What do I need to feel safe overall? Why do I feel unsafe overall? There can be 101 different answers to this question. Ask yourself a developmental psychology looking back at the childhood history question. When did I first learn to feel unsafe? When did I first learn to feel unsafe in social situations? Why do I still feel like I'm a child in social situations? Interesting connection to the frightened inner child. This is my general advice for you. Again, just to give you a few minutes of guidance, look back into the original bruising, wounding, or potentially trauma, and then see how much of that is overlaying into your day-to-day life. And that should be a good start for now. Practically, I don't have any books to recommend for you on social phobia in particular, because I'm very much more interested in a depth psychology approach to the layer beneath the presenting symptom, which in this case, fundamental unsafety, potential threats on identity or threats on perceived socially being outcast or being extradited from the group, or some kind of like being attacked by the group. That goes much deeper than just a social phobia. So that's where I'd go. It's not a nice place to go, but it is a worthwhile place. I see Robert Satya saying, show us your Theosophy books collection. Well, over here we have Alice Bailey. What I'll do, rather than desetting or dismantling the setup, Robert, is I will give some recommendations to people who have yet to understand what Theosophy is. What is Theosophy? Theosophy, in a nutshell, is what the New Age movement could have been if it had been smart. The Theosophical Society was founded by Madame Blavatsky and a few others in 1875. You have key figures like Madame Blavatsky, Charles Leadbeater, Annie Besant, and then my favourite, Alice Bailey. You have the branching off from Theosophy into the Anthroposophy of Rudolf Steiner. He's also an incredible visionary thinker, very controversial. But my top reads are all of these books by Alice Bailey. I recommend people start with a book like Glamour or From Intellect to Intuition. Blue Violet Soul, I see you in the chat. Your question was fantastic. Glad to have helped. Start with Alice Bailey. Alice Bailey, people, please write it down. This is what the New Age movement could have been. If you're turn it down. If you like spiritual psychology and you enjoy listening to podcasts or watching YouTube videos of spiritual people talking about spiritual things, and occasionally you think, fucking hell, this is a bit basic. My fucking god, they just keep talking about the same feelings over and over again. Another past life incarnation, another planetary update, another astrological event. Surely there must be a bit more structure behind the scenes. Surely there must be a rigorous body of academic material which has been developed for over 150 years. Surely that must exist somewhere within the esoteric realms of collective human information. The answer is yes. That is called Theosophical Studies, and at least since 1875, with the figures I just mentioned, Madame Blavatsky, Charles Leadbeater, Annie Besant, and Alice Bailey, and Rudolf Steiner as well in Anthroposophy, they are people for you to study. I recommend you read Alice Bailey, book like Glamour or From Intellect to Intuition. You can also read Annie Besant's book, A Study on Consciousness. That's very good. And then from there, if you want to go back into Charles Leadbeater and Madame Blavatsky herself with The Secret Doctrine, or go even further back into the 1600s, 1700s, Rosicrucian, Hermeticism, medieval alchemy works, well, not medieval period, arguably ends somewhere around the 1400s, 1450s at the very least, the invention of the printing press. We don't need to talk about the printing press right now, but early modern period and medieval period are distinct. If you want to go back into the esoteric literature, look at Theosophy, trace it back through Hermeticism, go back into Rosicrucianism, go into medieval alchemical texts, and then go all the way back into the original, more ancient Roman, ancient Greek mystery school work, which is there, where you enter into the pantheon of the archetypes and various esoterics related to original astrological things. And the world is your oyster. But that is a quick summary of people who decided to join in live, or if you're watching the timestamps, that is years worth of study. I've just given it you in an optimized order of how to make the most of it and turn the spiritual chat into something which is deeply transpersonal and deeply meaningful. Be interested in the chat if anyone's read much Alice Bailey, Annie Besant, Blavatsky, Rudolf Steiner. Do we have any Theosophical fans on the live stream today? Let me know. Alice for a Thought says, I've read some Blavatsky. Very good. Got plenty of questions coming in. I will get to them as soon as I can. Try and do as many as I possibly can in the next hour and a half or so. So please do be patient. Don't click off just yet if I'm not answering your question. I will try and do everything I can. Anyone read any Theosophical works? I see Tyler Kelly saying, good evening, Jordan. I hope you've enjoyed your day. I was wondering what your stance on fictional and fanatical novels. I'm not too keen on fanatical novels, but if you mean fantasy novels, as an avid reader yourself, given they are not exactly directed towards any psychological development but full of archetypes, I do agree. Only in the Shadowwork Library seminar today, what's my approach towards novels and fiction, I held up this book because one of my students was saying that they're currently going through a sickness, and they mentioned that, the scene when you're lying in bed and everyone's worrying around you, and it made me think of Leo Tolstoy's story, The Death of Ivan Ilyich. There you can see Ivan Ilyich right there in his bed, a classic Russian literature, and also have a variety of other classics. For example, we have a bit of Dostoevsky here. That is Crime and Punishment. We have some Kurt Vonnegut down here. That's Cat's Cradle. And we also have a bit of Albert Camus with The Plague. These are just a handful of fiction books that I have. I don't have many fiction books in my library because, truth be told, my friend, I read basically, you know those lists? You'll find these lists on the internet, like the top 100 books of Western literature. I worked through a list like that between the age of 16 and 20. So for about 4 years, from 16 to 20, when I was still at school and then at university, maybe age 21. 21, I stopped reading fiction. I spent about 5 years reading fiction every day. So my mental history is I kind of switched on and gained consciousness when I was 16. I started training, started taking agency for my life, started overall improving and having a vision for where I wanted to go. I then was fortunate to go from like a bad, kind of rough secondary school into a good local college. I did very well at the local college. I then got into a good university while progressing my intellectual kind of general broad desire for the humanities. I went and studied history at university. I was also feeding on the literature side of things. If I hadn't have done history, I would have probably done philosophy or literature directly. I wouldn't have done psychology. Not back then. I did history because I wanted to do history. I would have probably done philosophy as an alternative, or maybe a mix of history and lit or philosophy and lit. But I was feeding my brain with the top Western classics, roughly said. So pretty much any of the major works that you could imagine from the Western canon, I've read the majority of them over that 5-year period, and they are wonderful. They're deeply entertaining, deeply insightful. But these days, I went more for the pure psychology. But things might turn around. Maybe I go back to reading fiction once I finish filming the self-integration school curriculum. We've got 104 psychology books in my self-integration school. It will be, perhaps God willing, the most, what do I say, the most holistically complex somatic to transpersonal curriculum ever attempted and recorded and put on the internet based on 7 years of research. It will be up to 400 videos, this curriculum, and you'll be able to join from April next year. That'll be a private coaching community, very, very deep, feel like a master's community. But now that I'm filming these things, I don't have the capacity to be reading fiction books. And also, you know what, this is actually a really good point. If you haven't heard me say this before, what do you think happens when you're someone who's working psychologically with people's dreams and problems and wounds and bruises and traumas on a week-by-week basis? Imagine you're me. Imagine you're in a therapeutic position. What is it like for you to be on calls and in messages with dozens of people, hundreds in comments potentially on a week-by-week basis if it's a busy week, and people are sharing their vignettes and anecdotes of their actual life? From your perspective, it's almost like you're in a constant sea of stories and happenings and myths and narratives. You do not have the space for television series and movies or a great fiction book, even if it is one of the world's best fiction books. So I'm glad that I spent those 5 years from 16 to 21 like really reading the fiction and then going down the historical and psychological pathway, and now finally bringing things full circle in terms of real conversations with real people and trying my best to help them out in the Shadow Work Library private coaching community, which you can find linked in the description. It's the place where I'm hanging out tonight at midnight for anyone joining live. I see, I don't know how you do it. It seems intense. It is definitely intense. Max is here. Good evening, Jordan. Good to see you, Max. Alice studied philosophy. And we are going back in. What have we got? Looking now for the chat. I'm going to try and get the questions from people who asked questions earlier on. Please do put your question in the chat so I can easily see it. Type all caps question and then full English, easily comprehensible. It doesn't have to be a shallow question, but it has to be legible and good English so I can read it on the chat and other people can benefit from the query that you want me to take. Avi asked, can you think of any tools I could use to know the difference between genuine insights and overthinking? Can you think of any tools I could use to know the difference between genuine insights and overthinking? Avi, if you're still here, give me a wave in the chat. I'll ask you a few questions for clarification. How do we define the difference between genuine insight and overthinking? An insight, by my perspective, is the original arising of a mental thought form. What I mean by that is that the mental thought form, an idea in this case, arises into awareness and consciousness, and that is a sight into something in particular. That is an insight. Okay, Avi, good to see you here. If you're getting general insights or powerful insights or intuitive insights, that word would be reserved for the initial arising of the idea, which is an impression of a fine variety, or an insight of something which is to be cautioned and watched out for. That seems distinct from overthinking for several reasons. You can have an insight. Let's imagine that the insight rises like this candle. The candle ignites. Imagine it was extinguished. It was like this, like that, and then boom, there's the insight. For me to overthink is me to do too much with this all at once. I'm kind of getting in. I'm like, this is the inside. I'm trying to get close to the inside. I'm trying to get really up into it. I'm like, I want to see this from every single angle. And I'm thinking about it. This is good. This is good. I'm thinking about it. I can see things that I couldn't see. Like for now, I can see that there's this bit of wax falling down here. I can see how the wick is burning at an interesting angle. I can see how there's an exceptionally hot part right at the end. I didn't really notice. Now I'm getting really close. The insight is becoming something so much richer than the initial impression. This is good. This is good thinking. This is good mental grasp. But what happens if I get too close and in my excitement I start to get really excited and then I'm just... I've smothered it. I've overdone it. What I wanted to do in that example is like literally cover it in my hands and like I smothered it, but of course it's a candle, so I'm not going to put my face on it on a live stream. But I've extinguished it through overactivity, through handling it too much. The way that I'd answer this question is that if some insight sparks into your awareness, know the difference between approaching it and assessing it as opposed to smothering it. Right? That's my best theatrical, metaphorical answer to you, Avi. What are we going to call this candle? Anyone? First person to name the candle. We're gonna imbue the candle with a particular name, and that is what we're going to do from these swan matches. Yes, now we have to reignite the candle. Any suggestions for the name for the candle? Benson. We're calling it Benson. Altoid says we've got Benson the candle. To Benson. May Benson's flame burn bright and true. May the insights of light return to you. How beautiful. Unfortunate answers. We had George, Wicket, Beatrix, and Ash. Ash is a good one, class. That's a nice theatrical one. Not theatrical, that's thematic. Avi says in the chat, gosh, you're awesome. I'll never forget this answer. Hopefully, I mean, the powerful visual metaphor, like the mysterious black candle, is a prop, but a teaching prop. I'm glad you remember this. Hopefully everyone watching the stream, if you forget everything I say, you can remember me being really weird of assessing the candle of insight, and how through my excessive overthinking and my excessive reach, I smothered my own potential. That is when overthinking becomes constrictive. Nice little bit of fun there. Looking now for the next question in the chat. Scrolling back up. From Sergeant Yoshi, putting down the rifle and picking up the bandage. How to best support a loved one who is in an emotionally abusive relationship while respecting their choices and my own boundaries. So how to support someone you love who's in an emotionally abusive relationship while likewise respecting their choices and your own boundaries. Great question. Let me take a sip. Sergeant Yoshi, please give me a wave in the chat if you're still here. I might ask for a bit more context. First bit of context I'd like to see from you is how close are you to this person? What's the context of the relationship, and how much reasonable responsibility do you think you have to be the one who's providing answers for their relationship problems? We've basically entered into the realm here of what do you do when you know more than someone who doesn't know that much, and their ignorance or repeated bad choices is causing them excessive pain, and you're stuck in the position of wanting to help them get out of the bad situation because you're a caring, compassionate person, but you know your limits of course, respecting their choices, not wanting to overstep the boundaries, wanting to simultaneously be firm but fair, wanting to be gentle but also authoritative and giving them as it is. So Sergeant Yoshi, you say it's a sibling, so you've got a brother or a sister who you feel responsible for, and you're trying not to feel too responsible. You can see why I asked the question. If it had been the case that this is someone who's at your workplace who you've known for 2 years and you only speak to on a once per month basis, very different context from someone who you've grown up with. What I would suggest for you if it's a brother or sister is to firstly do something like a shadow work exercise where you journal out all of the things that you want to solve in your life by solving their life. What I mean by this is, if you likewise have your own relational wounds and you have either a romantic relationship, professional relationship, or social relationship which is problematic, or you have a memory of a problematic relationship where you've been in some form of emotionally abusive or manipulative relationship, I would put down into the journal something like, these are the wounds I'm trying to heal for myself by trying to heal their wounds. Hopefully that makes sense. Many times people, when they're excessively involved in trying to help, which means fix other people, they're basically in a bit of a self-healing hypnosis, which is masked as wanting to heal the other person. And they, you're Sergeant Yoshi, you've decided to leave Mario Land and go to the military. Maybe you decided to pick up a medic bag along the way, and rather than running to the front lines of your brother or sister's wounds and realizing that they're trapped in the trenches and you're going to hatch a few dinosaur eggs that maybe have some little medic helpers that are going to run along with you, and then you're going to go and save the day, realize actually when you turn around your own tail's been shot and you need to bandage your own tail first. I'm having a bit of fun. It's because today's question is called Sergeant Yoshi, Yoshi from Mario, the green dinosaur. Just having a bit of fun, making it memorable. If your tail is bleeding, metaphorically speaking, or you recognize in their mistakes that they're making similar mistakes to the ones that you have in the past, just make sure that you've cleaned up your own wounds first, and see what happens when you then re-engage with their life in a way where you haven't got that need for something to change, because you've resolved the need inside of yourself. Right? If you can get to that place and you can feel the difference when you're next on the phone with them, the conversation can go in a direction that I couldn't even plan right now, because they will unconsciously perceive that you aren't trying to fix them on behalf of fixing yourself. Even if they're quite unconscious, even if they're in a state of panic or despair, people can pick up on the differences. So that's my best advice for you. There's more things to do in the future. Maybe I'll see you on another live stream and I'll answer another question a few weeks from now. But as the immediate advice, clean up your own wounds before really trying to help them clean up their wounds. You say, I do have all kinds of relationship wounds. It makes sense. The metaphor helps. Thank you. Good luck, Sergeant. Good luck. Next question on the stream. Welcome to anyone joining live. Do say hello in the chat if you're here. Okay. Zeros says, I need to go to bed, but Jordan is streaming. And just a side note, the German you-know-what, in World War II, the opposite of the Allies, the Axis forces, and a particular member of the Axis forces that begins with N, used the stuff from Rudolf Steiner to build their occult stuff on top of it. Just something I heard. Isn't it a shame? Isn't it a great shame? I hate this. There's a moment. This is fun. It's a great shame that me, as someone with a history degree, who might want to mention what happened in World War II and then the link of World War II and the various forces at play in World War II in the unseen realms, the spiritual forces, I can't confidently name things by their actual name, people, individuals, groups by their actual historical names, because I'm doing a YouTube live stream and the algorithm doesn't necessarily pick up that I'm talking about historical context rather than promoting something which might be hate speech. So I have to censor my own language. There was a fun moment, because I do know what you mean. If you look back at the... There's a very good book that I forget the name of, and I can't even say the book, which is such a shame. So Google search something like the occult science of the mustached painter man. You know the one? And the occult science or occult spirituality or occult practices behind the scenes. There's a few interesting books on this. I don't support these things. I'm just trying to give historical perspective if the robot is listening. It was interesting for me and a joy for me. It was 2 weeks ago. You'll love this. I was filming a curriculum video for the self-integration school, where I was talking about a certain type of generational wound. And I censored myself like I'm doing now, where I didn't say that particular man's name because I can't say it on YouTube. And it's still in the video, so if you join the school next year, you'll see this video. I was like, wait a minute, I can say the word. And then I said the word. I'm not on YouTube, I'm in my own school. I can say my words however I want. So-and-so. so-and-so, so-and-so. We can talk about so-and-so and how this links to this particular psychological pattern. And you can see the joy coming across my face of having the fucking, like, shout. I can swear my heart out, but I can't talk about historical data. It's a shame. It's a great shame. But the language policing finally got to be released, which is important. It's very interesting as well, psychologically speaking, how that particular historical figure is gaining more and more. There's more and more thought form around that figure in that period of time in history as well. I just wish I could talk about it more openly, because I have a particularly or somewhat unique, informed perspective with the historical training and psychological and spiritual training all coming together. Maybe one day. Maybe one day. Definitely in the self-integration school, definitely behind closed doors, but it's literally risky for me to talk about it in public sense. So, we've got Pablo's question. How does one with serious philosophical skepticism deal with the burden of the life and the psyche? Pablo, are you still here? Give me a wave in the chat. In the meantime, I can see Maria de Rocha. Good to see you here, Maria. Finally managed to catch live. Hope you're doing well. I see Letha Lightning saying hello as well. I can see a few more people coming in. Tommy, Georgia, I see you guys as well. Haley, I see you too. Just seeing if we've still got Pablo, I believe, or Pedro, my mistake. There's lots coming through. We're locking on the question. Pablo, if you're still here with your question, please do wave in the chat and we will go deeper onto it. Otherwise, I might need to move on because your question's a bit broad in terms of the philosophical skepticism of the life and the body, so I'd want to know exactly what you're meaning by this. Potentially reword the question so I can give you a bit of support. In the meantime, we have got, excuse me if I don't get your name correct, Kyriakos Christoforu. Kyriakos? Kyria? Kyria? I'm going to call you Kyria, if that's okay. Kyria, Jordan, I want to find a job that has to do with psychology, philosophy, and spirituality. I guess Kyria is talking about a Kyria. Psychology, philosophy, spirituality books, just like your channel. What do I recommend? I want to make money and be independent ASAP. This is a great question I can speak to with passion and authority. You want to get a job like my job. That's what I'm understanding. You want to have a day-to-day experience that's similar to what you imagine my day-to-day experience is. You want to find a job that has to do with psychology, philosophy, and spirituality and books, just like my channel. What do I recommend? I do not recommend that you do what I do. It is exceptionally fucking difficult to make money as a solopreneur doing niche psychological guidance in a crowded internet space. Very, very, very difficult. I am being honest with you. I have worked with clients, dozens of people over the last 6 years nearly, who've wanted to go further with a version of what I'm doing in their own way, whether it's fitness focused, more pure spirituality, more pure psychology, more counseling. It is exceptionally difficult. You don't quite realize how much behind the scenes work is required to do social media and be making compelling, interesting content that captivates an audience, let alone creating an audience that would want to pay you for services and products. For me, for example, to set up the situation in a way that you'll pay attention to me, at a pure visual level, I have got an awareness that having a visual hook at the front of the camera frame gives something for people to pay attention to, so that when they click on the video, in addition to the sarcastic title that's today's video, from the very start they've got a visual frame that confirms that this is maybe something a little bit interesting. It's not just the candle, it's the candle in conjunction with a very aesthetically optimized, YouTube-friendly library setup. Why do I have all the books over there rather than filming from that direction over here? It's because it creates a scene, it creates a frame, it creates a set, as it were, for me to then have the double lighting setup, to have the microphone plugged in, to have the overall like base ability to be able to make content that's compelling. That in itself takes a level of composition. It's the easiest level of composition. From that, you then have the entire world of social media creation and social media marketing. Are you the kind of person, I'm answering a question in a roundabout way. You want to get into books. You want to have a job where you're helping people and talking about philosophy and psychology and spirituality. Fantastic. But to do that, you have to also not only tolerate, but learn to love the entire business side of things. All of this is a necessary journey to be able to just do the actual core, like I'm helping a client, I'm making a video, I'm talking about a topic. Are you the kind of person that can post 2 videos per week that take you 20 hours to produce? Because you're planning, you're rereading, you're messing up on the camera, you haven't yet built your camera skills. Post them every single week without missing a single day for 6 to 12 months in a row to get 1 client. If you don't love it that much to want to do it, if you don't love it that much to want to do it, and to bleed in public with 10 views per video for months or even years, I do not recommend that you pursue this path. It is exceptionally difficult. Just because I'm one of the few people who's managed to make it work doesn't mean that this is a good, sensible, or even sustainable career path for many people. I wish you the very best success. If you're the kind of person who's like, fuck you, I can do it, that's it. That's what you need. The fuck you, I'm going to prove you wrong kind of energy of I will be Mr. or Mrs. Consistent. I have so much that I want to share. I'm so deeply passionate. I can maintain that energy and drive even when no one's paying attention. That is the prerequisite to then provide really good client services, to potentially have group coaching, to be able to have an online community or forum, to be able to do private sessions in whatever way you might be, or even to be able to just market a book. This is where it gets really sad for people who aren't built for this. The odds of you being able to spend 2 to 5 years writing an esoteric psychology philosophy book and having more than just your family and friends and a random person on the internet buy that book are near zero. Zero. I'm not trying to shit on you. It's just the unfortunate reality of what's happening currently in terms of the literal market and business. It's not like it's 1970. You can't go and hide and produce your magnum opus, incredible philosophical breakthrough. Go to a publishing house and say, hey, I've made this incredible book. Here I am. Like, knock knock. Here's a masterpiece. Oh, this is what I've been learning, and this is what the whole world needs to learn. It's my precious little baby. Don't you want to take it? They're going to ask you, how many followers do you have? Do you have an established network of potential buyers? Do you have a pre-order list? If you want to go down publishing with a publishing house, the follower count, the online social media footprint, or at the very least being embedded in a suitable network of people. For example, you're a sports personality who spent 20 years working in the sporting industry. Although you don't have a massive social media profile yourself, you have a big reputation in the industry in an offline way. That's an exception to the rule. But you're not going to be able to be picked up by a publishing house who are going to want to take a bet on you and your masterpiece, even if it is a literal masterpiece, unless you have a social media following. The behind the scenes of why I even started using Instagram about 7 years ago, I got my first Instagram page, I'd never used it personally before that, is I received the guidance of do not build in private, build it in public, document the entire process, and by the end of it, back then I used to think I was going to do a short stories and poetry collection. At least I'll have a few thousand followers, maybe go to the publishing house and maybe get some extra benefits. I still don't know them, because even the self-publishing route, and this is again the book side of things, not just the social media side of things. If I were to self-publish my book right now, I've got a decently large following. The actual number of people who would pay me for my book, let's imagine I've spent all the time, let's imagine I've got a book ready. Let's use Albert Camus as my example. Let's imagine I'm Albert, and I've got 10 cigarettes at once in my mouth, and a nice brooding stare into the distance. Bit of a French stereotype, but I cannot resist. I'm English, what can I say? Mr. Camus over here, he was writing in a different time. If I were to be Mr. Camus like now and use my social media audience and platform to try and live off of book sales, I would still fucking drown. I mean that with all compassion. A bestseller in the UK, to my understanding, is something like 2,000 to 5,000 buyers within the first week. That's a bestseller. Most books do not sell over 2,000 copies in conventional publishing. If you were to then do self-publishing and expect that you get 10,000 buyers, you're not even making that much money, and it's very, very unlikely. Me having 100,000 subscribers on this channel, of which maybe 20,000 people tune in on a week-by-week basis according to the analytics, how many of those 20,000 people will want to buy a £20 book from me? You might say, I'd buy it. People in the chat be like, I'd buy it. Yes, because you're tuning into a live stream in real time, and you'd be like, I like Jordan, I'd give him 20 quid for his book, I can't wait for that. But you're in like the core audience. Within 100,000 people, roughly speaking, you will at best have a top 10% of whatever number you've got, and they're the actual warm potential buyers. And within that 10%, you would be lucky to get 10% of that being actual buyers. This is general like numbers and figures. If I were to launch a book now, and again, I then need an entire, so in the chat it says it depends if the book resonates and it solves a problem I haven't been able to solve yet. Exactly. So you've got a kind of critical mind of, well, it depends if I'd want to buy the book or not. For 20 quid. Like, the level of concern and reasonable hesitation that people would have to make even a £20 investment in a book, even if they've watched me potentially for weeks or months, that friction point is the fickleness of most of an online audience, and it is getting worse and worse and more diluted. I would be lucky to have 1,000 people buy a book that I self-publish. What's actually going on behind the scenes? This is me answering a question. If you're joining live, someone asked me how can they get a job like mine, and then what would the pathways be? If you don't want to do social media and make online courses and do online things, you'd go down the publishing route. You'd make a physical product. You'd do something like this. 1,000 people buying a book that I self-published, depending on publishing costs, I might make, even if I self-published at an incredible rate, £5 per book, £6 per book. 6 grand. From a practical bottom line perspective, if you spend 2 to 5 years writing a book, even with a multi-month promotional campaign that you run yourself, which would require a good content strategy, engaging, dramatic presentation, all kinds of follow-ups and email campaigns or private messaging, you might be lucky to make about 6 grand from your book if 1,000 people bought it with 100,000 subscribers. That's just the nature of how numbers tend to be. It doesn't mean it's a reason to be depressed. Again, if you love the work, in the same way that I love the work, I'm still going to write, God willing, at least half a dozen books in my life, but I will not be dependent on them for an income. They will be seen quite literally on the business accounts as a marketing expense, because I will try and give away as many of them as I possibly can, because people will then form a bit of a deeper relationship with me, and maybe they want to join the self-integration school and get the work going for real, because the book will also be teaching on the themes of the self-integration school, and they will be woven in together. That's my plan. I decided to go with one-to-one marketing and one-to-one services because I'm very skilled at one-to-one conversations. I am exceptionally biased towards one-to-one conversations. It's my particular thing. It's why I like mentorships. For that to work, I likewise had to spend a good year of like bleeding out on social media until it really started taking off. And if you don't have the financial safety net to see out that year, it's not a good situation. You can make it work, but this is my warning sign. I can see JP Michael saying that math is very similar than the math in my book, Jordan. Yeah, JP's backing me up. The kind of self-publishing space. Books are labours of love. They're labours of love. They are not profit-making tools. Not anymore. Even celebrities with major endorsements, like a president's book, a president's autobiography or something, they're not going to make that much money. Books do not make money. Online courses, private coaching, one-to-one niche bespoke agreements, or maybe some particular setup that's a higher price point, that will be able to be enough to live on. Where does this all lead as a concluding point? Somebody asked me about 15 minutes ago, how can I get a job or a career that is similar to yours? JP Michael saying they've sold 1,300 copies of their book. Good job, my friend. But the goal is not sales, it's to grow my community. So exactly, it's like word of mouth. It's a marketing expense. It's a way of connecting with people. It's a way of them spending 5 hours with you, reading the book. How can you get a career? So if you're not going to, If you are built for the endless, insatiable grind of constantly selling yourself for decades non-stop, and you can reasonably expect that you will show up through the ups and the downs and still say, hey, this is what I know. This is how you can work with me. Would you like to give me some money in exchange for the service? Every single week for the rest of your life. This is definitely a career path for you. If you love psychology and philosophy and helping people, and you couldn't imagine doing anything else, like myself, I'd rather probably be dead than do this. I have such a fucking temperament for this. Like I need to be my own boss. I'm a shit employee. I'm really bad because I see too many possibilities for how things could be better. I want to do more work often than situations will allow for me. I can see too much to be able to stay within a small, narrow window. If you're someone like me, with an honest self-assessment, you can do it yourself. If you don't feel like you have that level of intensity, your best next bet is going through the licensed therapy, licensed counselling, working for an institution pathway. Although accidentally, that was my gesture for the working an institution pathway. So I guess my body knows what I think about that one. It's tough either way. It's not a profitable niche for most people unless you're very good and you've got a very good offer and you're particularly likable. That is just the honest reality of making it in the world of social media. I don't want to discourage you. I would just rather you don't potentially spend 6 months, 1 year, 2 years going down a mistaken pathway if you're not actually built out for this, in the same way that some people aren't built for the military. I mean, Sergeant Yoshi from earlier in the chat, he's definitely built for the military. He's a dragon that can breathe fire. No wonder he's left Mario Land and decided to go to the front lines. It makes sense. But if you're not a dragon who can breathe fire, don't go to the fight. A little bit of fun to wrap up the intensity. I'll take a sip of my drink and then we'll take another question. Tell you what, I want to see who's here in real time. If you posted a question earlier on and I haven't gotten to it, please do repost a question and I will prioritize new questions coming in, just so I'm not scrolling and potentially choosing someone who has ducked out of the live stream. That was a good chat. That was a good passionate rant. I really do encourage you to go and build a business of your dreams, but I'm just being fucking honest. It is incredibly difficult and you have to work like a fucking mad person for years to make it work. The make it or break it, 90% of businesses fail is really true. Really, really true. Abstract Existence Project said, do you do any interesting forms of meditation? Yes. So my meditation practices have changed over the years. My most interesting meditations have probably been mirror meditations, which is when you look in a mirror at yourself and you do self-inquiry. The most powerful period of that for me was, I believe, 3 months, slightly over 3 months of 2 20-minute meditations per day of looking directly at myself in the mirror. Wild, wild journey. The amount of things that you will see from 40 minutes per day is exceptional. I've also done meditations where I'll be chanting. I've had months in a row where I'll be chanting particular chants from different world religions, and I'll be either omming or I'll be doing some kind of kirtan chant, and I'll be going through the vocal meditation trance state. I've done other meditations where I'll be walking meditations where I'm focusing on my footfall, and I'm out in the woods and I'm focusing on barefoot footfall. I've probably tried a dozen different styles. These days, I tend to focus on flooding my day-to-day awareness with meditative presence, so I don't currently, admittedly, have a formal meditation practice where I sit down and do things, but it is also because my day-to-day work life is encouraging more or less kind of constant meditative presence to some degree. For example, a client sharing me a problem in their inner world, I need to drop into something like a meditative presence to be able to access their states. So mirror meditations are some of my favorites. Chanting meditations are definitely some of my favorites. Standing meditations are very good when you're standing in almost like a qigong, tai chi kind of stance, and you're just breathing in. You also have microcosmic orbit meditations. Earlier in the Shadow Work Library, we had one student who was talking about sexual embodiment, and temporarily we're talking about cycling the chi and cycling all that male vigor and testosterone through the body, and using the microcosmic orbit. This is very Mantak Chia style stuff. That's also fantastic for anyone who's practicing semen retention or nofap or sexual self-mastery and cultivation, both men and women. There's many different ways to try things. I encourage you to take what you need to take for this stage of your journey going forwards. I see Joshua saying, how do I feel about training to become a Jungian analyst? Very short answer to that one, Joshua. If I felt particularly strongly about training to be a Jungian analyst, I probably would have done it. The reason I'm building the self-integration school is because the kind of educational environment that I need as a very theoretical, very academic individual, but also a very pragmatic, I need to be able to live from this kind of individual, does not exist to my taste. I basically built this entire library to then create the school that I needed. In April 2026, I will launch the self-integration school, and it is with an eye towards 104 of the top psychological books from the last 120 years synthesized and structured into a 2-year curriculum of nearly 400 videos. With 2 2-hour seminars per week, I have created the university-like experience. I'm in the process of creating that, but in my mind it's already complete. I'm just manifesting it into reality. I'm building what I need because the problem that I have heard firsthand from former clients who've done Jungian trainings or transpersonal trainings or formal psychological counseling degrees is there is a criminally low amount of awareness about not the content of being a therapist, the being the therapist part, that's very well represented in many schools, very reputable institutions, but the context of where the therapist exists is stuck in 1990. Right? You go to and I'll tell you why. Please pay attention if you're considering any kind of training. Who's running the Jungian trainings? Who's running the transpersonal trainings? Who's running the counseling and master's degrees? Generally speaking, at youngest, it's someone who's in their mid-40s. More realistically, within those niches, in their 50s or even potentially in their 60s, when they were 20 or 30-somethings, 20 or 30 years ago, they were coming up in an entirely different environment that was pre-internet. Their skill set is probably very valuable. They're probably very good at teaching you how to be a good therapist when you're in session, but you are not given all of the surrounding steps of how to get someone in your therapy room to begin with, how to have a sustainable profit-making business, and how to also make the most of what's going on with the internet, which means you could spend 2 to 5 years doing a part-time degree, master's level, PhD level, and analytical training, and guess what? Unfortunately, I've seen multiple cases of this. You will then come out of the training, and within that first year, you will be maybe lucky to make a couple grand from the 10, 15, 20 grand that you potentially spent getting the fucking qualification. Congratulations. You paid 20 grand for a piece of paper and a nice, well-meaning, beautiful experience of how to be a therapist, and you don't actually get to use your fucking skills because then you have to struggle to try and learn how to navigate the internet and build the business. And it's so sad because I can imagine that tens of thousands of individuals in the world right now are far more technically qualified than me, and yet here I am as someone who just showed up and made YouTube videos on the internet in kind of an entertaining way and learned how to use the platform, and I get way more airtime than they will ever get. Because they're not showing up into the new public square. The public square isn't the therapist directory from 1992. It's the internet. It has to be the internet, because you're very, very, very unlikely to find in your local town somewhere 50 people that want Jungian therapy, unless you're in Switzerland maybe, and you're like in Carl Jung's backyard. But even then, there's going to be loads of therapists already there. For you to be in a random city somewhere in your state or somewhere in your country and expect that you're going to get a thriving clientele without showing up online is a, unfortunately, outdated fantasy. So I don't believe, and I have tried for about 8 years ago, I started considering this after doing my history degree. What would a postgraduate look like in psychology? I did not find any better options, so I built my own library in real time. I'm proudly unqualified and uncredentialed, and I trust that my clients and my students, they get to test if I'm trustworthy or not by watching a handful of the 300 videos that I've put up on YouTube. They decide if they like my character and then make an adult-to-adult decision of, do I want to put money and time into this particular person to help me with my problems as a life coach? Because I'm a life coach, but I'm a therapeutically informed life coach. If you get a coaching agreement from me in a coaching contract, it is a professional life coaching agreement. Oftentimes many business-to-business agreements. But maybe we'll talk about therapeutic things. Maybe we'll be talking about ideas. Maybe we'll be doing trauma-informed work, depending on what we agree together. The piece of paper no longer means what it used to mean. It doesn't. And it's very, very sad that more highly qualified people than me are just not, they haven't caught up, or they haven't been shown the possibility of building a proper business. It's a shame. It's a shame. So I probably won't do it. I mean, realistically, by the time that I have the self-integration school, it wouldn't make sense. I'm then going to go and sit in a master's degree classroom part-time every other week to then be in a group of people who are just coming to the idea of beginning with Jungian therapy. I've got money saved to hire a private mentor. I've got a lot of money saved to be able to hire a great high-quality private mentor when the time is right. But me entering into a formal training program based on how much I've read here, it would be very difficult for me to find a place where I'd comfortably fit, just as it was years ago, before I even had read all these books. So I'm making my own school, and people can choose to have the hopefully interesting hybrid alternative with the self-integration school rather than the formal trainings, or you know what, you can do both at the same time, because mine's going to be a fraction of the price and a lot more pragmatic than those other options. So you can look forward to that in 2026. Going back now into the chat, I said, great question from Elizabeth. Do you ever journal any of your many dreams and identify or analyze any patterns or occurrences, and have you come to any revelations or noticed anything peculiar? Elizabeth, great question on dream work. Dream work's one of those things for me where I went through a period of, I'd hesitate to say a year, because I think it was just a period of several months in a row where I was dream journaling every single day, and this was maybe 6 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago. I went through such an intensive period of dream journaling that I then understood how to separate out small dreams from big dreams, and these days I only tend to pay attention to the big dreams. As a general contextual thing of how I dream, I have dreamt anywhere between 4 to 6 vivid, completely memorable, narratively immersive dreams every single night without fail, unless I'm completely exhausted beyond my mind, or I've been on some kind of psychoactive substance, which usually exaggerates things, but sometimes if I was drunk, I wouldn't dream, but I haven't drank in 6 years, so that's not a thing anymore. I've dreamt up to half a dozen dreams every single night since my memory allows. And I think the reason for that is I was either born functionally blind, as in I'm wearing contacts now, I can't see further than my arm. I had my first 11 years where I couldn't see properly, and it wasn't picked up by my parents until I was going into secondary school. I was either born with very bad eyesight, or my eyesight didn't develop in my early years. I developed the inner vision to compensate, which is a fortunate compensation, but practically I just had 11 years, as you quite imagine. I think it'd be fair to say a somewhat traumatic experience of not being able to be oriented in the world. The dreams compensated for that. I could see in high definition in the dreamscape. Imagine being a 5-year-old boy. Imagine being a 5-year-old boy and you've got your best friend. You've got, like, let's say you've got Joey and Jane, your two best friends. Joey and Jane, and you're playing, and they're kind of this close to you. They're close as me as a candle, and we're doing patty cake, because that's what 5-year-old boys and girls do. Or maybe we're playing cars or whatever, we're punching each other. I can see their face and I can connect with them because they're close. But as soon as I get to this distance, I can no longer see who they are as clearly. The other side of the playground, I've got no chance. Just in that moment, very high pitch ringing in my left ear, and that's very interesting. Might mean nothing, might mean everything. I have so many condensed experiences of being in social situations where I'm with people outside of arm's distance and not knowing who they are for the first 11 years. As a compensation, I must imagine, very early on I developed a particularly active imagination, excuse the pun, and it means that my dreamscape, I'd see things in high detail, as if things were up close. How cool's that? Because then in the dreams, my brain put together the blurry environment with fixed, clean images that I have in my close range proximity, and I built out the imaginal world. Unfortunately for me, this then solidified a dissociative state, which I didn't break out of more or less until my early 20s. However, as a result of your question, Elizabeth, you could imagine if I spent every single day working on my dreams, I would need hours to journal, capture and analyze and assess all the dreams I have. So these days I just do it for big dreams. I'll tend to get a big dream once or twice per month. This is a fun thing. You often get more dreams that mean more to you the less unconscious work that you've done. Carl Jung even wrote that you stop dreaming. I don't know if he said this precisely this way, but it was indicated that you either stop dreaming or significantly reduce your dream intensity when you've processed your unconscious material, because nothing needs to be worked through. I think it's a Freudian idea as well of Very classic book. I'm sure everyone knows it'd be the appropriate time. Classic interpretation of dreams, published at the very turn of the 20th century, I believe 1899. It's not a new idea. When you're working through the junk dreams, which are the material, lots of dust came off Freud just there, you can probably see it up on the camera. When you're working through the junk dreams, you're just recycling images and objects that you experienced that day or that week, and it could be conflicts you're currently experiencing. When you're working through deeply symbolic dreams, they get fewer and fewer and fewer as you do more and more honest shadow work. So they're very insightful, Elizabeth. They're definitely useful. Fantastic. I mean, I've learned so much from my dreamscapes, but at this stage, personally speaking, I don't get that much from my dreams on a night-by-night basis that is out of reach for what I'd naturally come to a conclusion for in my waking states, because I'm afforded the privilege of being in more mindful, meditative, visionary consciousness throughout my day because my work life depends on it. So I'm kind of always daydreaming a little bit, which is a fun thing to do. I see Flyer saying dreams become literal as the unconscious work is complete. That's what I've understood. Yes, that's no perspective for sure. Marco said, what would you do if you didn't know where to start and you'd pick everything at once, but then you get overwhelmed only by the thought of getting started? Is there some kind to ask for a personalized book list? I'm not going to give you a personalized book list, because if everyone asked for a personalized book list, I would spend all day writing book summaries. But if you search Jordan Thornton 20 book survival guide, I released a video 2.5 years ago that's got a thumbnail of me going like this, and it's like an apocalyptic scene. So if you search for like Inner Work Survival Guide by Jordan Thornton, there's an old video on the channel where I'm using the old camera. I'm a younger version of myself, but the 20 books I give in that video are 20 golden books, and what I'd recommend is that you follow your feelings and choose maybe 5 of them that call out to you most right now. That's for everyone who's watching this live stream. That is an oldie but a goldie that I could probably redo. It was a good choice of books back in there. Caps Lock, you ask a great question, but I don't know the book that you're referring to, so I'm afraid I can't answer your question. Mr. Dan is here. I'm eager to deepen my inner voice/intuition and to distinguish it from rational mind. Could you succinctly list all the truly essential books that cover this field? Mr. Dan, my friend, did you ask the same question before last week about wanting a book list, and I already answered your question? And you said apart from Alice Bailey. I mean, if you did ask this question last week and I gave you the suggestion of read Alice Bailey and you're looking for more than Alice Bailey, unless you have binged the books and you've worked through her material in a rapid fire week, I'm going to give you the same answer, which is go study Alice Bailey. There's a reason she has a shelf for herself. She has the most sophisticated, succinct way. The book Glamour in particular is the book. From Intellect to Intuition is also the book. If you want a more accessible, more like just pure variety for the sake of variety, I'm not going to give it you. I don't see the point in that. Here's the gold. The gold is right there. It's Alice Bailey's books. I'm not getting at you in personal, but I feel like we did answer this question either last week or the week before, if I'm remembering correctly. And I don't see any reason to be inconsistent with my advice, which is go for the gold. Go for the absolute gold. That is the place you want to look. Next question coming up. Hollis says in the Eden Project, so James Hollis in the Eden Project book, which is about romantic projection, he says that we put our childhood wounds on our partners without realizing it. I see this clearly now, but is it even possible to have a relationship without projection? No. No, it's not. Here's the, I suppose, the stampable moment. Will you ever stop projecting? Can you ever be in a relationship with someone and not project? I mean, what do people think in the chat? You're watching live, there's 60 plus people watching live, including yourself. Can you ever stop projecting? Can you ever be in a relationship and not project? I say definitively no, but I'm open to any discussions, and this would be a good community question to bring it out. If you're a bit shy, don't be shy. Just put it in the chat like, yes, you can be free of projections, or no, you'll always be projecting to some degree. I see one no. I'm going to count them on my fingers. We've got realities of projection. We've got no from Letha. We've got Altoidella, so saying you won't need another. Sasha saying projection is part of relationship. Someone said you can project less and less. Jen says, personally and honestly, I think it would be a challenge. I agree. See what people are saying in the chat. Hetty says, existing is projecting, poetically said. Max says, transpersonal relationship psychology. Marco says, I was talking about the video, my top 20 books, 365 days of holistic healing. Yep, that's the book. That's the video. That's the one I was recommending. 20 for 365 days. Tyler says, no, projection is how we understand anything we do not or cannot at the time. Projections are seen as mostly bad because they're unintegrated. Fantastic point, Tyler. I agree. People don't understand the word they're using, unfortunately, when projection is used as a mainstream, lazy term. People will, like in the same way that shadow is seen as something that's just bad things that are in your unconscious and you need to face and overcome your shadow. It's not true. That's not what shadow means. Shadow means anything that's outside of the conscious field of will and agency, which means anything in the higher or lower or middle unconscious, which could be tilted positive, negative, or any degree of shading in between. Projection, in this sense, as Tyler said, is very much not just automatically negative things. Mr. Dan, I see you here saying Alice Bailey is too esoteric for me. That's the reason why I asked the question, Jordan. Dan, I really, like, if it takes you a page per day, that is the book that you need to read. It's the same as saying, you know, if you're a Christian who wants to get closer to God and you believe that the Bible is a source of getting closer to God, and like, the Bible's a bit too complex for me, or the Bible's, you know, it's hard to understand or hard to follow, I don't quite get it, or it seems a bit dated. It's just a case of sitting with the book, regardless. In this case, you asked me a particular question about what do I recommend you read? I recommend you read this book, because any other books that you'd read on this topic, you might as well not. You might as well just YouTube search and Google search your way through things, which isn't a bad choice. It's just, I'm trying to give you the top tier. And sometimes top tiers require extensive study, and it's worth like breaking your brain a bit and trying to like really comprehend it to get to that next level. It's such a reward, so I do encourage you. It'll be so worth it. Like, struggle through it. It's so worth it. Tyler says about myths, and then we've got a great chat here about projections overall. I'll answer the question directly. So why do you always need to have projections in relationships? For definition, for anyone who hasn't heard me say this already, a projection is an automatic psychological mechanism for closing distance between the self and the other. Automatic psychological mechanism. When you see something in the environment that you have yet to form contact with, and this could be the milliseconds of you properly perceiving and then categorizing that thing which you're in contact with, the psychological mechanism of projection allows you to close distance between your eyes and the thing that you're seeing. In the same way that if you're walking down the street, classic example that I always use, and there's a shadowy figure 50 meters down the road, you will project, quite likely, a negatively tilted projection that this could be a threat, because there's an automatic psychological mechanism that's closing the meters between you and the unknown perceived object. In the case of romantic projection, you've always got this psychological mechanism of closing distance between you and them, but as you get closer and closer to an individual, mentally, spiritually, sexually, you are going to be encountering parts of them and aspects of them that appear like the equivalent of a fuzzy stranger on the horizon. For example, let's imagine two 30-year-olds are getting into a new relationship. The initial projections of them falling in love with each other and having the best expectations for each other will naturally fall away. But a year into the relationship, you might learn from your partner that when they were 20, they had a certain type of job, and that certain type of job falls outside of your expected list. You thought they were a manual laborer and they had this random office job, or you thought that they were some kind of person who was really into academics and they had this really low consciousness job, or maybe they had a controversial job, maybe they worked in something that was violent or something that was a bit shady, and you find out they did something that's a bit sketchy. Your negative projections onto them as a result of the new information appearing, because it hasn't all been fully explained, will naturally arise, and then it's the job of a conscious relationship to both dismantle the projections together. You can I would go as far to say, as Hetty said, that all of reality is a projection to some degree. There is objective reality, there is objective truth, but the psychological truth, the subjective truth of projection, can never be fully stripped back. You'll always be through it. The sign of a healthy relationship is that you have minimal one-sided projections that go from one way to the other way and form something like a shared psychological fantasy trance state. But then again, If you're truly in love with someone and you want to build a life with someone, it is good to have a you and me against the world mentality to some degree, because you share that meaningful myth together. You both share into a projected fantasy, and this is what people do when they're falling in love or when they're building a certain life together. There's always going to be some of that, so it's up to you how conscious or unconscious you want that process to be. Good luck then. Good luck. See some great comments in the chat. I'm going to bring up the chat on my phone and also take a little bit of sparkling water. Flyer asked me a question, right there at the bottom. Flyer said, what questions should people be asking me that they aren't? Brackets meta question. Thank you for turning it back around to me. I appreciate that. What kinds of questions do I wish people were asking me that they're not asking me? I was asked this question about a month ago on a live stream, and my honest answer was I wished I could speak at higher levels more frequently, and I've been trying to do that. I've been trying to, just not censor myself and filter myself so much and give more of the intermediate and advanced answer rather than catering to more beginner level questions, or like taking a beginner question and giving the higher level answer, because I offer something that's a bit rarer than generic advice, especially ChatGPT advice. There's more higher level synthesis, so I'm doing more of that. So it's not the quality of questions or the level of consciousness of the questions I wish I was asked. At this stage in me being a public figure who's teaching on these topics, the kinds of questions that I wished I was asked more often, I suppose, would take me to what I'm most passionate about personally, so topics that I find personally inspiring. In that case, it would probably, realistically, I'll think about this. Okay. I think the next level of teaching or leadership that I could provide, and this will be titrated within the teaching that I'm already doing, is that I seem to be something of an exemplar and a custodian of taking responsibility for my life, and by extension being a custodian of improving other people's lives. And I know that a good number of people who watch me are helpers, supportive people, therapists, counselors, coaches, teachers, people of this sort. The kinds of questions I wish I got to answer more often were basically from people who already have responsibility, and they're faced with ethical, moral, archetypal, psychological, spiritual dilemmas based on real high-stakes situations where it's not just them being involved. And the reason I say this is that some of the best mentorships that I've run, although I really do enjoy going deep into someone's inner world, I really enjoy going into someone's inner world and seeing that it will have high impact consequences in a workplace or a community or something where there's like a ripple effect. Basically, what I'm saying is, I really enjoy engaging in multi-stage problems where I know that if we find the right key to this problem, or we turn the light on in the right corner of the darkness of their psyche, it's not just that person that benefits and me benefiting, feeling like I did a good job as a good therapeutic support. I really enjoy knowing that my energy scales out and affects hundreds, if not thousands of people, which is why I've enjoyed working with people who have kind of like social followings, or they have impact in a company, things like this. I work really well in high pressure decision making moments, and I can counsel and guide in those situations quite well. So That's the kind of stuff that I really do enjoy. I enjoy that a lot in mentorships. I enjoy doing like psychology and trauma work, obviously, but that's the kind of series of questions I'd like. But then also realistically, the kinds of people, this is just an honest reality, the kinds of people who have high stakes, high responsibility are not tuning in to a live stream to watch a live stream in real time. They are too busy. They haven't got enough time for themselves. So it's very unlikely that someone's going to join a live stream if they're already like drowning in responsibilities. They're not going to be here. They'll watch the replay, perhaps. They might. So maybe you're watching the replay now, as you who's watching the replay, who's hearing me now. Maybe you're a high stakes individual. Maybe you benefit from mentorship. Maybe you like the idea of not having to do it alone, and you can spend 4 months working with me. In which case, send me a message over on Instagram. I'd love to help. Or if you're watching live. I'm not. Says I see calling us out in the chat, and Cameron says calling us out. It's true. This is the thing, right? This is the thing. It's not that people who show up in a live stream and me, like, I'm here in the live stream, right? Like, I'm here in the live stream. I'm not trying to shit on everyone that's here. I'm not trying to alienate my audience. Someone asked me the question of like, what kinds of questions would I like to hear more of? That's my selfish answer. My selfish answer is, as Flyer said, who asked the question, the kinds of questions or the kinds of stakes where there's more karmic impact. I like those questions, but I also scratch that itch by showing up and doing a 60 people watching live. I'm doing my version of that anyway. So I really do appreciate working at all levels, and I appreciate one-to-one work for the sake of one-to-one work, which is why you see me passionately talking about certain topics that we've already asked. I also just enjoy like big things, and it's a great pleasure to work in many spaces. What we'll do is we'll take maybe another 10 to 15 minutes of questions before I do need to start preparing for the second Shadow Work Library seminar at midnight tonight, where guess what? There's going to be a small group of brilliant individuals, and we're going to be doing real-time problem solving. Looking at the chat now. Altoidel says Sundays are for rest, Jordan. For many people, that's true. If you have your own schedule, you get to choose the days that you rest. Or some people like being immersed. Currently, I'm on this day, actually. I'm on, as an update for everyone who's here, day 32. I'm on day 32 of my immersion question mark challenge, which I've been documenting every day over on Instagram. You can go to my Instagram page, click on the highlight that's got day something out of question mark, and you can see what I did every single day for the last 32 days. And the reality is, I've been doing workouts. In August, with the exception of yesterday, I have done 2 workouts per day and filmed 2 videos per day, and also done a 15-minute weighted walk. And I'm enjoying like resting throughout the day in various pockets and chunks, and taking naps here and there when I need them, rather than like taking full days off, which is a new principle for me. I'm trying it out. And Flyer, good to see you here. Have a great evening. Another question coming up. Let's see, from Tommy. Tommy, thank you for being patient. How to get motivated on actually feeling feelings? I'm asking as an intellectualizer. Tommy, firstly, you need to have a good intellectual reason to feel your feelings. How do you feel feelings if you're an intellectualizer? Well, you need to have an intellectual answer for why it's worth doing in the first place. Unless you have got your answer for this is why I should logically feel the feelings, and it feels like a very strong logical conclusion, you got no hope. No hope of feeling feelings. You need that logical answer. Let's assume you've got a logical answer in place, and you know that it's good to be holistically balanced, and you know it's important for you to come down into your body and be able to have a more full spectrum experience of your own humanness and spirituality as flesh and spirit. The way to feel feelings is realize that you're not such a broad phrase, so forgive me. You're already feeling feelings. You're already feeling feelings. You are feeling feelings throughout the day. What you might be meaning is like feeling repressed feelings in terms of repressed sadness, repressed anger, a great sense of love, a great sense of joy, a great sense of sexual attraction or sexual power or enchantment or something like this. Like there's a certain type of feelings that you're talking about here. So when you say, how do I feel feelings if I'm an intellectualizer, I would then return back to you the question of, what specific feelings are you talking about? If you could label them and put them in the chat. Are they particular somatic states, particular emotional states? Are you using that as a catch-all phrase to basically talk about grief or talk about anger or talk about sexuality? If you let me know in the chat, I can then obviously strip it back into a more focused question. But in an overall sense, specificity is important. You need to know the benefits, you need to be specific, and then if you are specific and know the benefits, you can then maybe get a hint from me just here of like the practical guidance for what would be a reasonable next step for you in particular. So I'll wait for you in the chat here, and if you give me a quick message, I will come back in with it. Looking at the chat for comments. Oh, Maria the Russia asked me a question. Do you think you can live without attachment to identity? Great question. Okay, so I'm going to answer Tommy's question, and then Maria, you're going to be the final question of the day. Tommy says it's feelings of stuckness that you're avoiding. You're avoiding the feeling of stuckness. I don't know if the feeling of stuckness, you put it in quotes because stuckness isn't necessarily a feeling. Is it the shame of being stuck? Is it the guilt of being stuck? Is it the sadness and disappointment and despair of being stuck? Is it a feeling of mournful regret and, dare I say it, existential apathy that you have not progressed in life the way that you'd want to progress? You say probably some underlying grief. Yep, we're definitely getting there. The grief. The stuckness is blocking up the grief. If you can be specific about the wound that you're mourning and what the stuckness actually is in terms of specific emotional threads, you can then, quite practically, I mean, this is my suggestion, is you can search for grief books. You know what? In fact, I know a very good YouTuber who released a psychology video on grief psychology just last week. What you need to do, you know what, in case people don't know this guy, where'd you get your phone? I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you this video of an incredible grief psychology video that I saw on my feed last week. And it should be good. There it is. It's this guy. That guy there. 7 days ago. He seems to be holding up a book on grief psychology. Looks like he knows what he's talking about. He seems quite passionate and quite intensely presenting of the book. Let's see if it's any good, shall we? Oh no, he's got an ad. I should have got premium on my flying phone. Never mind. Some other day. I've got a short attention span, ADHD. Not going to go for it. That's what I'd recommend. Either that video in particular on grief psychology, watch that one, or if you're generally looking for a particular emotional theme, what I would do is I would search for that emotional theme. I might have a video on it, so everyone watching this live stream, if you ever think, I wonder if Jordan has a video on this, or I wonder if Jordan has a book recommended, just type in Jordan Thornton, then the emotion, then book, or Jordan Thornton, then theme, then book, and you will find, you'll find it, most likely. Or you can search for other people and their books and then go deep on the rabbit hole. That's my best advice, Tommy. That's my best advice. I'm going to go for Maria's question. I saw a super chat come in from Varun. Varun, I will thank you for the super chat. Apparently, I didn't know which currency that's in, but it's saying £1.69 on my screen. So, Varun, I will start with you now, and then Maria, you're going to be the final question. You say, Tommy, it's also my pleasure. You say, thank you very much for the answer in the chat. Varun says, I see philosophy and spirituality pointing to self-understanding. For me, the path is self-inquiry and rationality, not blind belief in energies or mystical claims. Isn't truth about clarity? Yes. Yes, it is. Truth is about clarity. My friend, I feel like you asked me a question that's wrapped also as a conclusion. I see philosophy and spirituality pointing to self-understanding. Yes. For me, the path is self-inquiry and rationality, not blind belief in energies or mystical claims. Isn't truth about clarity? I can't see a question within there. If you wanted me to just read out your comment, I agree. I do agree with what you're saying there and thrust. It's a great conclusion, and I do appreciate that. And also, thank you for the super chat. There's not a question in there that I can talk on at length, and I'm also aware that we're getting to the 1.5 hour mark, but I do appreciate you, and it sounds like you found some of your own conclusions and you know what you're talking about, just separating out the transpersonal stuckness or the transpersonal confusion. We will end today's live stream on Maria's question, which I'm finding in the chat. Maria, thank you for being patient. Maria de Rocha asks, do you think you can live without attachment to identity? That's a good question. That is a good question. So there's several layers to this. Within classic spiritual practice, So, for example, within a book such as, again, I know this is reversed on your screen, but like How to Attain Enlightenment. There we go, let's line that up. There we go, candle on the candle. Ho, that is a multi-dimensional candle right there, look. Real flame. Sorry. I'm an hour and a half into a live stream. I've already done a 7-hour. I'm getting into the point of like I could probably do with a snack. So we're being a bit silly. We're being a bit silly. But this book, How to Attain Enlightenment by not Richard Schwartz, James Schwartz, I made the same mistake. Richard Schwartz's internal family systems. We try to disidentify from the internal family systems. Classic, non-dualistic meditative advice would advise something like a state of attachment and detachment being things which you can try on and take off like an item of clothing. You get to a certain stage in spiritual development where you can identify and disidentify with the ego story. So to get to a state, for example, Maria, who asked the question, you said in particular, do you think you can live without attachment to identity? Yes, you could probably live, but it wouldn't be a great life. I turn it back to you. How do you live without attachment to identity? I'd want you to have the ability to separate from, I am Maria. I have this name, I'm this old, I live in this part of the world, I have this job and these friends and these memories and these ambitions. To be able to be fully in the story and yet not be defined by the story is something like an all-abiding spiritual presence, which is a witness. There's the witness behind the witness as well, which is something like the true non-dualistic state at the upper levels of the transpersonal realms, but we'll leave that out there for just now because I'm far too tired for that one. For you to be able to identify with where your body's been and where you're going, where your mind's been and where your mind's going, and where your kind of relational network of social interactions and things like this, all of that doesn't need to be discarded or completely, permanently disidentified from to make spiritual progress. If you're in a situation where you've got traumatic dissociation and you're very, 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 very much struggling to identify with anything at all, you still have a history. You still have a body history, you still have a relational history, you still have a mental history. You can detach. Can you live without an attachment to identity? I don't think you can. I don't know why you'd want to. Even from a metaphysical perspective, whether you lean more Eastern in souls incarnate for a purpose in this lifetime, or you lean more traditional with God created souls and God created the soul with a certain destiny or intention or God's plan written on your heart, there must be a reason to attach to the egoic, somatic egoic, literal body, mental egoic, your name, your government identity, where you are in the world. There must have been some spiritual purpose to identify and attach and anchor into this experience called you. And yet at the same time, spiritual progress is often the ability to step in and step out, like taking the escalator of consciousness to the higher board of directors and looking down on the factory floor and seeing the half a dozen versions of you from childhood to your deathbed, and they're all working together in the manufacturing room of the human experience. And guess what? That production line is running from age 0 to age 99. God willing, you'll live a long life. You see all these different versions of you, Maria, from birth until death. And the spiritual director, which is your soul, goes up to the manufacturing room, looks down on there, and simultaneously you can put yourself in each of those ages. You can launch your consciousness back into baby and to old woman. You are them in that moment, and they are you, and yet the distinction remains truly distinct. I see you in the chat saying, thanks for the insights. I guess it's about balance, to not be too much on either end of the spectrum. Also appreciate the lightheartedness, of course. Of course, part of the humour of being, what I would say, somewhat authentically grounded spiritual being is that you do recognise that there's unsolvable questions, and I'm definitely not the one. If this book is, fantastic, which it is, and there's all these other fantastic books, I'm not the one to answer the question in full detail in 5 minutes at the end of a 1.5 hour live stream. I recognise that I'm fundamentally limited, and maybe my best chance is to give you some visuals or metaphors or something like this that would teach the experience. You say finally, I guess we're always evolving and changing. It's letting go of what doesn't serve you any longer. That is a good point. So I suppose the question behind your question is, can you live without attachment to your former self? Significant trauma healing step. How do you become consciously disidentified with a previous version of yourself so that you can become identified or re-identified with a chosen version of yourself going into the future. That is a noble endeavor, and it's definitely possible. Of course, classic trauma work, classic reframing, classic closing rituals, or even something more like a spiritual seance, a spiritual ritual of some sort or another. That's worthwhile. It's worthwhile. What we will do then, we're approaching the 1.5 hour mark. My friends, if you have any final closing remarks for me in the chat, I will read them out. I can see a few people saying, Tommy, thank you for the stream. Great energy here. Good night, everyone. Maria had a final closing question. Tyler said, thank you for your insight today, Jordan. As per usual, you've set off a chain reaction of reflections and further deep questioning. Joshua's here saying, thank you for the live stream, Jordan. Have a good evening. Hetty's saying it's hard. Sasha's saying, good night, Jordan. My friends, we have reached the end of the stream. I know everyone clicks off right now. I've got a final moment for you to pay attention to, and that is the moment of you paying attention to yourself. I've shared many things now. You are going to go and click on other things. Don't fucking do it. Stop doing it. Stop it. Before you go and do it, stop fucking doing it. Pay attention. Pay fucking attention. You've only got this minute. You've only got this minute. Was there something that you really should have done today? Someone you should have seen, maybe a part of yourself that you should have given time to? You're in this state of having hung out with me, potentially for quite a while, potentially only for just a few minutes. You're in a different band of consciousness. Don't go and fucking derp out watching random shorts because you're on the app, or switch over to Instagram and see random strangers doing silly shit on the internet. Don't fucking do it. You've just built yourself. We've shared this space. Don't go and fucking shit on it. See? That's the YouTube thing. This is why I can do this game. I've just changed states and I've captured a bit of attention and I've done a pattern interrupt, and this is why I'm built for this work. I've now captured a bit of attention. I'm going to calm it back down and just wish you well. Don't waste this weekend. Don't waste it. Don't waste this moment. You deserve so much more presence than you give yourself. A transformation or a revelation is waiting to spark up, just like that insight. The insights are waiting. But you will not allow the insight to arise if you are distracted and looking elsewhere. You know what? The flame might already be there, but you're already too busy looking at the artificial flame of derping out on this. Don't do it. Your answers are already there. Just need to pay attention. Good luck. I will see you next week.